Mali has made history by reclaiming the town of Kidal from the terrorists who have been holding it hostage for almost a decade. For a decade, they denied the Malian government access to its own territory, but the Malian army has finally entered the town of Kidal, the bastion of terror of the terrorists. This victory was led by the president of the transition, Colonel Assimi Goïta, who declared on November 14, 2023, and I quote, "Today our armed and security forces have seized Kidal. Our mission is not over. I remind you that it consists of recovering and securing the integrity of the territory without any exclusion." End quote. I think the best way to celebrate this historic achievement, which has been a long time coming, is to rewind the tape and see the uphill battle that the Malian people had to fight to get here. I'll be quick. Let's start. 2011, France, the UK, the US, and NATO forces, or in other words, the self-imposed police of the world, acting based on their own fabricated lies, decided to bomb a sovereign country, arm rebels, and in the process kill civilians, kill President Muammar Gaddafi, and spread chaos in the region in the name of democracy. Keep in mind, while being bombed, Gaddafi told the world that these Western powers were arming terrorists. But you know, Western media propaganda machine is like pregnancy. The belly cannot stop until the intended outcome is reached. Although I would argue that pregnancy can be stopped to a certain point, but the lies propagated by Western media can be stopped at any time. Only if decent people care enough to do something about it. Let's be honest, these pretty faces will never lose sleep or will never be bothered by any court of justice in this world for their crimes. And by the way, when I say pretty faces, I actually mean the opposite. In 2012, now with Gaddafi gone, Chad, Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso were now fully open for terrorism. In January of the same year, the terrorists launched the rebellion in the north of Mali with the help of other terrorist groups who were already infiltrated in the region. They wanted all the smoke. They brought so much heat and overrun the Malian army, who were poorly equipped and poorly trained. And that's how they took over the town of Kidal, and it became the epicenter of the rebellion. They also managed to take some other town in the north and declare their own state, which was called Azawad. This sparked a chain of events that plunged Mali into chaos and violence. Now in March 2012, the Malian army decided to overthrow a democratically elected president, Amadou Toumani Touré, who only had a few months left in his presidential term, because they blamed him for mishandling the crisis. You see, the chaos on top of chaos created a power vacuum, and the terrorist groups who initially came to help their fellow terrorists saw an opportunity for them to also shine. So they stabbed each other in the back and imposed their own style of leadership based on what they do best, terrorizing the civilian population. In January 2013, the new sheriff in town, Diakounta Traoré, asked France for air support and intel on the ground. However, France, the former colonial master, under the former president François Hollande, decided to launch an operation called Serval, which included boots on the ground. French troops were on Mali's territory. But remember, Mali initially only asked for two things, and France over-delivered. The French military intervention in the country was to deal with the armed groups, the terrorists. And the Frenchies were later joined by the UN troops under the cover of MINUSMA, and both troops managed to restore order in North Mali. However, they could not remove the terrorists from Kidal because these terrorists simply refused to give up their claim to independence in the north. It is also important to remember that the UN troops had a base in Kidal, but they were often accused or seen as being biased in favor of the terrorists. In June 2015, the rebels signed a deal with the Malian government, but this deal was never fully implemented. That peace deal had no chance of being successful because it was not very popular among the Malian people. Also, these terrorists accused the government of not respecting their rights and demands, while the government accused the terrorists of not cooperating and continuing to carry out attacks. Now, to add insult to injury, the French army humiliated the Malian army by preventing them from entering Kidal under the pretext that it will mess up the peace process. Interestingly enough, Colonel Assimi Goïta was among the soldiers that the French troops stopped from entering into Kidal to fight those terrorists. It seems like along the way they began cozying up with these terrorists and forgot their initial mission, or maybe getting rid of these terrorists was never part of their mission in the first place and we just assumed. In August 2020, a military coup took place in Mali led by Colonel Assimi Goïta, who became president for 38 days and then was later appointed as the vice president. However, in May 2021, Colonel Goïta led another coup, ousting the interim president and the prime minister, accusing them of violating the transitional charter and undermining his authority. Now, at this point, the so-called international partners were not very happy with Mali, a sovereign country, doing what it thought was right for itself. So they did what they do best: condemned the military coup, suspended aid and cooperation. In January 2022, Mali under Colonel Assimi Goïta demanded that Denmark immediately withdraw its troops from its territory. But initially Denmark refused to leave based on nonsense, basically telling the Malian government that they won't leave because they were invited by France. Anyways, a month later, the same demand was extended to the French troops and its European partners who had been in the country for a very long time but failed to deliver against these terrorists. The desperate housewives of the Sahel moved around the region on motorbikes, and despite these foreign forces having the latest technologies and gadgets, somehow they couldn't defeat them. I mean, let's just park it here. In June 2023, Mali demanded the UN to withdraw its peacekeeping mission from its territory by December of the same year, but they began withdrawing from July. However, the UN peacekeepers' withdrawal from Kidal was only a few weeks ago, and it was not short of drama, and the terrorists did not like it. They did not want the UN peacekeepers to leave. Why? I don't know. Anyways, I have a video about the UN dramatic withdrawal from Kidal. I'll pin it in the comments. Now, on November 14, 2023, the Malian forces under the leadership of Colonel Assimi Goïta have managed to deliver what many had promised but were incapable of delivering. And this was done in less than 2 years. Some Western media are trying to attribute this victory to foreigners because Africans cannot do it, you understand? We can't do it by ourselves. We always need some external forces to come and help. Don't believe that nonsense. The town of Kidal was delivered by the Malian forces. That's it. You see, in my village, they say, the money you've worked for, you never spend it the same way the money you've been given or the money you've stolen. Never. Nobody loves Mali more than the Malian people themselves, so it is not a surprise that a Malian solution to a Malian problem has worked. My heart goes out to all the Malian civilians and soldiers who have lost their lives since the beginning of this crisis. This is a victory for Mali and a victory for Africa. The end.
We, ni nini?